It's this. Again, if you think you can't do something, try it. You never know. And failure is okay. That happens. It does sometimes. There were times I fell off the bike. I can tell you from my first trip, I thought I'm going to do live streams. I'm going to do all these cool things. And the first time I went live, I was in a Burger King parking lot, and I'm looking at my other iPhone, having my other iPhone on my head, because this was really early years of live streaming. So it was 9 years ago, so there wasn't as much live streaming type stuff. And I remember I pegged into my pedals, and I went and fell right over. Luckily, not many people were watching the stream, but you know, you might fail sometimes, but just get back up and try again. And then prayer is so important, guys. I mean, we're at a church today. If I just talked about the fun of my bike trip and that kind of thing, that'd be great. I think it's a neat story. Maybe some of you are like, oh, this guy ever gonna shut up? But it's neat, but we're in a church, and I can't tell you how important prayer is. I told you there was a threefold process of my trip. Share the gospel. I was able to give out over 2 trips, over 2,000, maybe under, it's probably about 1,500 pamphlets of the gospel. So people got that. Who knows what they did with it? Maybe they gave it to somebody else. Gave it out to churches to give to friends and say, hey, this crazy guy came in and spoke about going across the country. Here, check this out. And it was just a simple plan of salvation. I also learned how important prayer is. My first trip, I didn't listen to anything. I prayed. I found these prayer starters. Every time I'd see a school, I'd pray for all the teachers I knew. Every time I saw a truck, I'd pray for people that I knew that were truck drivers. Every time I would see a church, I think of all the pastor friends I had. And so there's so many, and we can do that every day. We are so busy we miss that, but we can look around and see things. Or even like names of streets, you know how many times I ran across a Cook Street and thought of Barrett's Chapel? Or family names that I just pray for those families. But prayer is so important. And in fact, on that trip I was seeking, my third goal was to find out what God had purpose for my life. Because I really didn't think he had purpose to season potato chips all my life. I will tell you, one of the hardest things I've ever done in ministry was leave Barrett's Chapel. I was here for 4 years. We got married, and it just really was. It came down to we had to do something. We either had to move up here full-fledged, or we had to just go back home. And that was one of the hardest decisions we both made. It was one of the hardest decisions. And we love the kids that we were working with up here, and we still stayed connected. It's so funny. I get messages sometimes, hey, pray for me about this or that, or I know we talked about we need to have a Chi Alpha reunion sometime out here and just fill this church up with all these kids that used to come out here and just to connect again. But I knew my purpose wasn't to season potato chips. I didn't know what it was, but I was helping in a youth group at the time, but just didn't feel like that's what God's purpose. So I prayed this whole trip. Into the trip, right, I'd find what my purpose was, right? Nope, season chips for another year. A year to the date later, I had an interview with a small Christian school in Wilmot, Ohio, and got hired as their principal. If you know me, yes, I have a hodgepodge of 4 years of Bible degree, but not really anything in education. And was probably, actually, they told me later, I was the third least qualified person for the job. That's always really encouraging, but something told them that, this was a purpose. And so my wife got hired as a secretary after I got hired. We joke because she put her application in first, but I got hired first. But anyways, we saw that little school. It was 58 students. We were at $350,000 in debt. We were kind of not in the greatest place as a school, and so it wasn't the greatest thing to take over either. There was some stuff that had happened, and it wasn't the greatest. I guess it was a great opportunity, I would say. But now today, next year, we're gonna have about 130 students at the school. God has financially just completely blessed the school, and I'm not saying it's because of me. But we put a lot of prayer into that school as a board, as a staff, and it's really neat to see how God has changed so many things in that way. But that's what my purpose was. God found it a year later. And this trip, God opened up some things that on the first trip when I was praying, God, what do you want me to do? He was speaking very heavily to me about a ministry for kids, like biking trips, camps that were bike trips, even for adults. that wanted to just find some purpose in their life, taking 5 days and going. I mean, Ohio is beautiful. It has a bike trail from Cleveland all the way to Cincinnati. You only have to go on public road for about 20 miles.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's awesome. There's bike trails strewn all the way across the country. And so this next year, I'm going to be starting Billy Goat Biking Adventures, and that's my dad's handle on the semi was Billy Goat. And I want to get into public schools and talk about my trips, and then offer summer camps with Christian men as counselors, and I love what you guys are doing with that. I've been watching that a little bit on Facebook, where you're getting into these public schools and speak. It is so cool. I know for a while I would speak at Fellowship of Christian Athletes over at the local public school, and I thought it was always ironic the Christian school principal walked over to the public school and was able to speak to kids about Christ. Like that was it was great. And so that's kind of God just speaks to you. And you know, we don't have to go across the country on a bike trip to do that. You can go fishing. You can go fishing for a weekend by yourself and seek out God. You can go hiking, seek out God. You can spend time just driving and seek out God. There's so many things that we can do. It doesn't have to be a bike trip. But one thing about a bike trip that I realized the 2 times I've done it, we need to slow down. We miss out on so many divine opportunities because we can jump in the car and we can go 75. I mean, we shouldn't go 75, but we go 75 to our next destination to get there, but we might have missed 3 opportunities to speak to somebody. But we can still do that. We can still find those divine appointments. And so that's kind of my challenge. I'm going to play